WNBA Finals. And so I'll leave it there. I mean, I'm just obviously disheartened. You know, I'm a human too. I have a family. I have 2 kids who are devastated by these comments. And so all I'll say is just, you know, it's obvious.
Everyone knew Caitlin Clark was going to change the WNBA. But nobody expected the backlash to get this ugly, this fast. When she signed that historic $28 million deal with Nike, it was supposed to be a victory lap for women's basketball. It was supposed to be the moment the league finally crossed over into the mainstream after decades of struggle. But instead, that signature on the dotted line put a massive target on her back. Things went from tense to absolutely explosive after her latest commercial went viral. And now, the situation has reached a breaking point. It seems the league's higher-ups, including Commissioner Kathy Engelbert, have had enough of the Caitlin show. The silence from the league office, combined with some very calculated comments, suggests that the message being sent right now feels less like a welcome and more like a warning. A warning that could change everything for the rookie who was supposed to save women's basketball. To truly understand why this specific Nike ad caused such a meltdown, you have to look at the financial and emotional context of the league she walked into. The WNBA has been grinding for nearly 30 years. You have legends of the game, women who are arguably the best in the world at what they do, who have had to play overseas in Russia, Turkey, and China just to make ends meet. They have destroyed their bodies playing year-round basketball because the WNBA salaries simply weren't enough to retire on. The max salary in the league is roughly $250,000. These are the women who built the foundation, who carried the torch through the dark years when nobody was watching, when arenas were half empty and the league was fighting just to survive. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, a rookie from Iowa walks in and secures an endorsement deal worth $28 million without playing a single professional minute. That's not just impressive. That's life-changing. That's generational wealth handed to a rookie while the veterans are still fighting for charter flights. Think about that for a second. The women who paved the way, who sacrificed their knees and their backs and their prime years playing on 2 continents just to make a living, are watching a 22-year-old college graduate land a deal that dwarfs their entire career earnings combined. The resentment was inevitable. The tension was building long before the first game was ever played. When Nike dropped the ad featuring Clark, the imagery was undeniable. It painted her not just as a rookie, but as the savior. The "this is what it takes" messaging wasn't just about her practice routine. It was framed as if she was the only person on the planet working that hard. The marketing was brilliant, no question about it. It highlighted her distance shooting, her ability to pack arenas, her star power. But inside the league, it was interpreted very differently. Critics and fellow players saw it as Nike crowning a queen before she had even earned her stripes in the pros. It wasn't just an ad. It was a declaration that the face of the league had changed overnight. And that didn't sit well with the people who had been carrying the torch for the last decade. That felt like erasure. It felt like Nike was saying the WNBA didn't matter until Caitlin Clark got here. And that sentiment, that feeling of being overlooked in your own house, is what fueled the locker room revolt that we're seeing play out in real time. The commercial was just the spark that lit a fuse that had been waiting to blow for months. Even before the draft, the warning shots were being fired from the highest levels of the sport. You had Diana Taurasi, one of the greatest to ever do it, going on national television during the Final Four and issuing a grim prediction. She said, "Reality is coming." At the time, people brushed it off as a veteran keeping it real, maybe just trying to temper expectations. But looking back, it sounds almost like a threat. It set the tone that the league wasn't going to roll out the red carpet. They were going to build a wall. And when Clark arrived, that wall was made of hard fouls, double teams, and a level of physicality that rookies rarely see. The narrative shifted immediately from "welcome to the league" to "you haven't proved anything yet." It wasn't just competitive spirit. It felt personal. The vibe shifted from mentorship to isolation, and the viral nature of that Nike ad only made the divide wider. Suddenly, every player Clark went up against wasn't just playing for a win. They were playing for their own brand, trying to prove that the $28 million girl wasn't untouchable. It became a badge of honor to pick her up full court, to hip check her, to make her life miserable. And this is where the WNBA front office failed miserably. Usually, when you have a golden goose, a player who is single-handedly doubling attendance numbers and selling out arenas, the league steps in to protect that asset. The NBA did it for Jordan. They did it for LeBron. But WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert found herself in a PR nightmare of her own making. Instead of fully defending her new superstar from the rising toxicity, she made a comparison that shocked everyone and essentially poured gasoline on the fire. In a widely publicized interview on CNBC, when asked about the dark, toxic clouds forming around the Caitlin Clark discourse, specifically the race baiting and the vitriol between fan bases, Engelbert didn't condemn the hate. She didn't draw a line in the sand. Instead, she compared the friction between Clark and Angel Reese to the legendary rivalry of Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. She smiled and talked about how rivalries are good for business and how they drive ratings. On the surface, you can see what she was trying to say. Magic and Bird saved the NBA in the 80s, turned it into a cultural phenomenon. But the context here is completely different. Magic and Bird weren't dealing with social media doxing, racism, and threats to their safety in the same way. By reducing the very real harassment to just good business, the commissioner essentially told the world that the WNBA is okay with the toxicity as long as the check's clear. It was a massive blunder. It sounded like she was condoning the hostility rather than protecting the players. It was a subtle signal that the league prioritizes the drama and the viewership numbers over cooling down the temperature. That interview wasn't just a slip of the tongue. It felt like a calculated stance. By not shutting down the aggressive narratives, the commissioner essentially sent a warning to Clark's camp. You are part of a collective, and you aren't bigger than the WNBA shield. We will use your name to sell tickets, but we won't step in when the heat gets too high. The backlash to Engelbert's comments was immediate. The WNBA Players Association, led by Terry Jackson, actually had to release a statement condemning the commissioner's lack of leadership. Think about how crazy that is. The players' union had to step in and say, no, racism and toxicity are not marketing strategies, because the commissioner refused to do it herself. This is the warning disguised as policy. The league has been scrambling to manage the behavior of the fan bases, releasing late statements condemning toxic discourse. But the timing is suspicious. It feels like the establishment is trying to humble the new guard. They want the ratings Clark brings, but they don't want the individual power that comes with her Nike-backed brand. They're trying to walk a tightrope where they profit from her fame while simultaneously allowing the reality check narrative to beat her down. The warning didn't stay in the boardrooms or on CNBC. It translated directly to the hardwood. We've all seen the clips. The hip checks, the hard fouls, the physical play that goes way beyond normal defense. The most infamous moment, of course, was the Chindy Carter incident. The ball wasn't even in play. Clark was waiting for an inbound pass, and Carter blindsided her with a hip check that sent her sprawling to the floor. It was a non-basketball play, plain and simple. Carter then called her a derogatory name before running down the court. But watch the reaction. The refs didn't call a flagrant foul in the moment. They called a common foul. The league's initial reaction was slow, and the foul was only upgraded to a flagrant one a day later, after the clip had been viewed millions of times and public outcry forced their hand. This hesitation to punish the aggression sends a loud message to every player in the league. It's open season. It reinforces the idea that Clark has to pay her dues the hard way, and the league isn't going to blow the whistle every time she hits the deck. If that had happened to LeBron James or Stephen Curry, the suspension would have been immediate. For Clark, it was just another welcome to the WNBA moment, and then you have the Angel Reese factor. You cannot talk about the warning sent to Caitlin Clark without talking about the Chicago Sky rookie who has positioned herself as the anti-hero in this story. Reese is a phenomenal rebounder and a great player, but the media narrative has pitted them against each other since college. The league loves this. They love the good girl versus bad girl framing because it sells, but it also endangers the players. When Reese was fined for refusing to talk to the media and later seen cheering on the sideline while her teammate hammered Clark, it created an atmosphere where the basketball became secondary to the beef. The commissioner's Magic versus Bird comment validated this dynamic. It told Reese and every other player that this conflict is what the league wants. It encourages the hard fouls because those hard fouls turn into viral clips, and those clips turn into ticket sales. Clark is being used as the bait. The warning is clear. Survive the gauntlet and maybe we'll respect you. But we aren't going to make it easy, but there's a bigger power struggle here, one that involves billions of dollars. This is Nike versus the WNBA. On one side, you have the WNBA trying to maintain its traditional hierarchy, trying to keep the focus on the league and the 144 players. On the other side, you have Nike, a global juggernaut that has invested millions into making Clark the face of the sport globally. Nike doesn't care about the Chicago sky or the Connecticut sun. They care about moving Caitlin Clark's signature shoes. Nike's marketing machine is powerful enough to override the WNBA's own narrative. When Nike puts out an ad that ignores the rest of the league, it forces the WNBA into a corner. If the commissioner keeps trying to suppress the Caitlin effect to appease the angry veterans, they risk alienating the biggest partner they have. Nike is betting on the individual. The WNBA is trying to protect the system. And right now, the system is panicking. You have to look at the financial reality to understand the jealousy. Before Caitlin Clark, teams were flying commercial. They were squeezing into economy seats. The revenue wasn't there. Clark arrives, and suddenly charter flights become the norm. Not just for her team, but for everyone because the league had to standardize it to avoid looking bad. She is literally paying the bills for the people who are hazing her. And that creates a weird psychological tension. It's hard for a 10-year vet to accept that the rookie she's guarding is the reason she finally has legroom on the flight home. It breeds resentment. It breeds the thought, why her? I've been working this hard for a decade. The Nike ad stripped that quiet resentment bare. It showed Clark alone in the gym perfecting her craft, implying that her success is purely a result of her work ethic. To the vets, that feels like a slap in the face. It ignores the infrastructure they built. But to the fans, it's inspiring. And that disconnect between the player's perspective and the fan's perspective is what the commissioner is failing to bridge. Let's dig deeper into the specific voices that have amplified this warning. It wasn't just Diana Taurasi. You had Cheryl Swoops, a WNBA legend, appearing on a podcast and making factually incorrect statements about Clark's college record. She claimed Clark played 5 years to break the record. She didn't. She claimed she took 40 shots a game. She didn't. When a legend of the game goes out of her way to diminish the accomplishments of the incoming star, it sends a signal to the rest of the league. It says we don't respect her. And when the league doesn't correct those narratives, it allows them to fester. It creates a permission structure for the hostility. The media tour that happened before the season started felt coordinated. You had players on The View. You had veterans on ESPN, all subtly downplaying the hype. They called it Great White Hope Syndrome. They called it privilege. And while there are valid discussions to be had about media coverage and race in sports, the way it was weaponized against a 22-year-old kid just trying to play basketball was intense. It turned every game into a political statement. If you rooted for Clark, you were accused of one thing. If you rooted against her, you were accused of another. The basketball was lost in the noise, and then came the Olympic snub. This was perhaps the most official warning of them all. The U.S. Olympic Committee, which is heavily intertwined with the WNBA establishment, decided to leave Caitlin Clark off the Team USA roster for the Paris Olympics. They argued it was about experience and chemistry. They said she hadn't paid her dues. But let's be real. Leaving the most popular female athlete on the planet at home was a power move. It was the establishment telling the world, we decide who the stars are, not the fans and not Nike. It backfired spectacularly. The conversation around the Olympics wasn't about the gold medal. It was about Caitlin Clark. By trying to exclude her, they made her bigger. They proved the point of her fans, that the gatekeepers were actively working against her. The commissioner, interestingly enough, didn't fight for her inclusion. She hid behind the committee's decision. This was another missed opportunity to bridge the gap. Instead of using the Olympics to showcase the future of the league, they chose to protect the hierarchy of the past. The fallout from all of this is that the WNBA is currently sitting on a powder keg. The new fans who came for Clark, the millions of people tuning into Indiana Fever games, are seeing a product that feels hostile. They see the hard fouls. They hear the nasty comments. They see the bad officiating. And they wonder, why does this league hate its own savior? It's a valid question. The comments sections on WNBA social media posts are a war zone. It's not about stats or highlights anymore. It's about jealousy and hatred. If the casual fans feel like the league is rigged against Clark, they will leave. And if they leave, the charter flights go with them. The viewership drops. The money dries up. The TV deal, which is up for renegotiation and expected to skyrocket because of the Clark effect, could take a hit if the networks feel the growth isn't sustainable because the league is cannibalizing itself. The commissioner needs to realize that Caitlin Clark isn't just a player. She's an economy. Sending warnings to her or trying to humble her through inaction is bad business. The viral Nike ad proved that the world is watching Caitlin regardless of what the league officials want. The spotlight is on her, and every cheap shot, every tone-deaf interview, and every warning is being recorded in 4K. The question now is whether the WNBA will protect its golden goose or let jealousy and pride destroy the very thing that could finally elevate women's basketball to where it deserves to be.